Alright guys, today I'm going to be reviewing Enslaved Odyssey to the West, which is available on the Xbox 360 and PlayStation 3. It was also developed by Ninja Theory, which is responsible for one of my personal favorite games on the PlayStation 3, Heavenly Sword, and it was published by Namco Bandai Games. This is an action-adventure platforming game which places great emphasis on storytelling and character interaction, as well as a pretty simplistic combat system and an excellent art style. But let me start off with the story. The basic gist is that it's set 150 years in the future, and you play as Monkey, who the game starts off, he's on a slave ship and he's on his way to Pyramid, which is basically this place that's enslaving all these people. However, the ship that he's on begins to crash and he breaks free from his cell. And he's trying to escape. He's following a girl that he also notices was able to break free from her cell, and her name is Trip, and these are the two main characters throughout the game. So he basically follows her, makes it to the end of the ship, and she's in an escape pod. She's going to leave without him. Fortunately for him, though, he's able to grab onto the outside of the escape pod, and they crash land on Earth. However, it's not just a made-up fictional Earth, it's actually New York City 150 years in the future. And it's immediately evident that this place is ravaged and it's decaying, and it's, a war took place and everything is basically broken down and decaying. However, the coolest part to Enslaved is its different take on the post-apocalyptic war outlook that a lot of games have, such as a comparison to Fallout. That game is dark and gray and just overall gritty. However, Enslaved takes that and spins it on its head. It's basically a really colorful game, tons of lush greens and reds, and it's basically more realistic because you think about it, nature would take over. After civilization has been cleared out, the trees would grow into buildings, there would be plant life all over the place, and this is how it would really look if something like this did happen. So once you finally crash on the planet, Monkey wakes up and he finds out that he has a headband on his head. Well, Trip took one of the slave headbands and put it on Monkey. And basically what this does is it places him under her command. And basically if she dies, he dies as well. And he has to take her commands. If she tells him to stop, he has to stop. It's forcing him into her command.
My head feels like it's ripped open.
It's the headband.
What?
The slave headband. The one I fit on you.
You put this on me.
Let me explain.
Get this thing off, or I'm gonna rip your head off.
No.
No? You think I'm screwing with you?
You man, stop!
So she tells him that she wants to go to her village, which is really far away, and that once that he gets her there, she'll take the headband off. So these two really hate each other. Monkey wants to kill her and she doesn't trust him, but she needs him to get to her village, and that's where the whole story really takes off. And it's all really believable because not only is it an interesting story, but there's some excellent voice acting. It's very believable, and that's also due in part to some really great facial expression and lip syncing, and just overall high production value when it comes to telling the story and the character relationships and how it evolves over time throughout the game. It's one of the main drawing points of the game, and I think without a solid backbone of a story and two likable characters, the game would kind of almost fall flat. So the gameplay in Enslaved is actually kept pretty basic. There's really only two different gameplay styles, and that's platforming and combat, with some very light puzzle elements thrown in, and they're almost non-existent throughout the game. There's only maybe 3 major puzzles. But I'll start with the platforming, which does borrow heavily from the Uncharted series, which is definitely not a bad thing because I loved the platforming segments in Uncharted. However, Enslaved takes things and kind of makes them a little too easy at times. I'll start with the good points though. It's fluid, it's fast, it's fun to do. Monkey just looks really cool as he transverses the environments in the game, flips, upside down and grabs onto this ledge and jumps really far. It looks cool, and you can see that in the gameplay here. It just looks fun to do. Now, the problems with this is it's almost too easy. It's too automated. It's fail-proof. Everything is highlighted to an extreme degree so that you can never really mess up when you're platforming. First of all, everything in the game that you can jump onto and grab, 90 to 95% of it is shining, and it's hard, you can't miss it. So while you're climbing on the side of a building, every little brick that you can grab onto looks like it's, piece of metal. It's a little ridiculous, and it kind of detracts from the detailed environments, and in my opinion, they should have toned it down a little bit. Now, when you're jumping, you can almost not fall off and die, unless it's like the side of a building that's crumbling and you have to get off in time. You can basically, and I actually played most of the platforming segments like this, as long as you point in the general direction where you should be jumping and just keep on hammering the A button, you'll be able to make it without a problem. Because as long as you're looking in the direction you gotta jump and you press A, you're gonna jump to that cliff and you're gonna grab it 100% of the time. Now, this isn't totally bad because it does keep it, flowing real nice, and there's not a lot of trial and error to it. And believe it or not, I really did enjoy a lot of the platforming segments in the game, because not only do they usually take place in some of the most breathtaking environments in the game, but like I said, it's just fun to see. And a large majority of the game is platforming. There's 14 chapters, and a couple of them are actually almost exclusively platforming with little to no enemy interaction. And overall, the game takes about 8 to 10 hours to complete. But getting back to the gameplay, next up is the combat, which is going to be, for the most part, the make or break part of the game for a lot of people. And it almost was for me, because the first hour or two that I played of Enslaved, I was actually kind of bored and I wasn't enjoying it too much. And I took a couple of days off from playing the game, but I'm glad I came back to it and gave it a chance, because it's not until midway in the game where the combat kind of starts to open up and it gets more complex. Because in the beginning of the game, you simply have the X and the Y button. X button is sort of your light attack, and the Y button's your heavy attack. And you never learn any new moves besides being able to dodge and being able to, charge up your weapon and stun your enemies, and there's a wide attack. However, you never learn any new combos than what you start off in the beginning of the game, so from beginning to end, you have those same 2-button moves, and that's it. As simple as the combat may be, every once in a while you might have to use a charged attack to, break a guarding enemy's shield. But I did find it, keeping me entertained until the end of the game, because combat, there's not a ton of it in here, so when it does come up, it doesn't always feel like, oh, here's the combat again, let me get this over with. I found it fun, even though it started to wear a little bit thin by game's end, only because you can get through the game by just dodging and normally attacking and charging every once in a while. You don't have to block, you don't have to use your staff weapon. It's encouraged, but not necessary. You do eventually get sort of like a shooting element in the game where you can take your staff and use it as a gun, so you can shoot enemies from afar, which isn't totally necessary, only for a couple of points in the game, but it is fun. And also to keep things a little more fresh, since you are accompanied by Trip the entire game, you can kind of use her at points in the game to distract enemies. She can kind of be your decoy while you try and come up and flank your enemies. And of course, you do have to take her along with you, so you gotta throw her across the ledges and wait for her before you, open a door. Trip can also use a dragonfly, which is not controlled by you, it's controlled by the game. But it'll give you an overhead view of what to expect in the coming area, key points that you have to get to, and enemies to avoid.
There is.
Okay. I know how we're gonna get across. My cloud works here.
What's that?
It's a cloud.
Doesn't look like a cloud. Well, maybe a little like a cloud.
I'll be right back.
Now, one last element that I wish they'd explored a little bit more is Monkey does have access to a hoverboard, which he only gets to use very sparingly throughout the game, in a couple of boss encounters and in this one part where you're on the water. It's very impressive, and it actually controls really well, and I thought it was cool, but like I said, it's limited in its use to only certain sections in the game. Now, there are a couple of technical issues with the game that keep it from being an excellent game and instead makes it just a great game. Now, first of all, the camera at times, especially during combat, does have its problems. It tends to kind of zoom in too close on the action, and it gets hung up in corners sometimes. Outside of combat, it's not too bad, because the camera will kind of point you in the direction to go, so you really don't have to do too much manual camera control. It kind of takes care of itself. Now, the next part is that quite frequently during the game, not too much, but enough to be noticeable and enough for me to complain about it, because normally I don't care too much for slowdown, but the game does stutter quite often, and you don't even have to be in combat. You can just kind of be walking through the environment, and it'll really, really stutter. and struggle to keep up, and it really takes you out of the experience and out of the gorgeous environments in this game, and it's such a shame. And lastly, my biggest problem with the game is the texture pop-in. Now, you'll be in a cutscene, and every time it cuts to a different angle or a different scene or something, all the in-game character models and the environments, it'll take them a second or two to get their texture quality in. And this happens really quite frequently, almost every cutscene. So, you'll see an object, and then it'll take a while for it to get its full texture quality. And this is a problem with some games, but Enslaved really suffers from this. It even happens, in the environments. Every time that you come out of a cutscene and you go into the gameplay, same thing happens. Takes a couple of seconds to warm up and get the textures to come in, and it really, once again, detracts from the overall experience of the game. Quite bad enough to kind of lose some of its luster. It kind of felt unpolished, like the game could have used a little bit more time in development, and it might have been rushed to get out for the holidays, which is unfortunate. So overall, I would say Enslaved Odyssey to the West is a game that I can safely recommend to fans of platformers, action games, adventure games, or if you're just looking for some great character interaction and storytelling. This is one to check out. Thanks for watching, guys.
Do you think you could tell me what the plan is?
To get you home as fast as possible so that you can take this thing off my head and I can break your neck.
I meant...
Yeah, I know what you meant.